right, welcome to another episode of the Bulldog Bark. I am yours truly, the Guru. With me, as always, got my partner in crime, BFC, Butler's Fighting Crew. And with us today, we got another very, very special guest in the building. He led Butler to back-to-back national championships in 2010 and 2011. Honestly, when I think of Butler basketball, along with like Brad Stevens, Gordon Hayward, Shovel Mack, you got to think of the one and only Matt Howard. Matt, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Happy to be here with you guys.
Awesome, man. Hey, we appreciate you hopping on. Love talking to former Bulldogs and always a dog, I guess, and current. You're always a dog, man. Current Bulldogs too. Really appreciate you hopping on and talking with us. Excited to broadcast this out to Butler Nation. But before we dive into maybe some of the good old days and some other things, just talk to us a little bit about what you've been up to since your Butler Bulldog days.
Yeah. Hey, first, like you were saying there, in the war song, you do say Bulldogs ever do or die. So I think you're sort of committed to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I since I was playing at Butler, I got about 6 years through Europe, and then got to play another year in Israel. Finished 7 years, and then since that ended, I came back. Joined a team at Merrill, doing some financial planning there. Almost 7 years now, or going in my seventh year, and probably the biggest job that I have right now is coaching and being a dad to these three little guys, and my wife Brittany. So that's us.
Yeah, absolutely. And before maybe we go into anything else, I'll let BFC ask his favorite question about the overseas, which I know he wants to ask.
Yeah, one of my favorite things is just looking at, how different the, cultures are overseas, especially when it comes to, athletics and how crazy the stadiums can get. So what was your favorite stadium to play in overseas?
Wow, yeah, that's a great question. This is probably a good example of some of the places that you'll play. I remember, not my experience, but Jokic was being interviewed before they were playing at Miami, and a reporter was talking about how the Miami crowd was tough to deal with, and he just looked at him and laughed. He's like, I play in Serbia, bro. Like, it's crazy over there, and that's how it is. I mean, they will shoot off flares, they throw stuff on the court. That's specific to like Eastern Europe, some of those countries like that, Serbia, Turkey, the Yugoslavian countries for sure. Israel, there was a couple places that way. My wife has a great picture. I even realized that we're playing in the semifinal of the Israeli league, and there's like the whole upper deck is just full of smoke, and you can't even see anything. And you can see, like, it looks like fire, but it's from these things, flares that they're shooting off, and it's in the middle of the game. And I didn't even notice it was happening. Like, she asked me if I noticed that later. I was like, no, I had no idea. And so that was stuff you dealt with. Now, in France and Germany, there wasn't anything like that. People were actually very nice, almost too nice. It threw me off when I went from going from Greece and that to France and Germany. But yeah, it's a whole different environment. People, and let me just sort of tell you this real quick, because I think it frames it pretty well. I saw when I was in Greece, I saw a fan on the street, and they make it known. Like, if they know you, they make it known. So I was talking to him. I said, you guys are a little bit crazy. And he said, no, my friend, we are passionate people. I was like, okay, I get it. It makes sense. They really are. I mean, whatever they do, they put everything into. And so for them, if they're going to be a fan of a team or support a team, they're going to go all out. And so I guess that's how you end up with, some of those pictures and things you've seen.
Yeah, that's what I like to call myself too, as a Butler fan in Hinkle. Same. I would like to say the same answer. But no, that's really cool. I feel like, yeah, you do see like that smoke and stuff, even at like soccer matches and, basketball matches. It's a very different environment. But But yeah, man, I mean, kind of going back and let's jump into a little time machine here. Let's go back in time. Talk to us about kind of your recruitment. What kind of got you to Butler? What made you buy into the Butler way? Because when I think of the Butler way, I mean, you're the first thing that comes up, and I've posted that many times. Like, there's one, if there's someone that just kind of embodied the Butler way, it was always you. So, kind of talk to us about that process, your recruitment process, and what made you buy into that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, and I don't know that I can necessarily take credit for it, and I'll explain why. But so from a recruiting standpoint, I was looking at all. Yeah, I wanted to stay close, so I pretty much closed anything off that was beyond sort of the Indiana borders and a little bit into Ohio. Because I from where I grew up, and so IU they had the Samson stuff going on, and just real simple. I'll tell you, I went down there. I met with them. When I left that office, I was almost convinced that I needed to go there and turn Indiana around. I grew up an Indiana fan, being in Southern Indiana, and he is an amazing salesman, amazing. And after I left there, I'm talking to my mom on the ride back. I was like, yeah, this isn't. It just something's not right. And then Purdue, I love Purdue, and they had an incredible class and offered five of us. What they told us is they only offered five of us, and they had, if you remember the guys at that time, Jawan Johnson, Robbie Hummel, Etwan Moore, Scott Martin, those guys all committed pretty quickly, and I wasn't ready to, so that opportunity sort of went away. And then ultimately it was, I hate to admit this, I really do. But it came down to Xavier and Butler. And, I spent a lot of time at both places, and it certainly didn't hurt that I had a friend in Zach Hahn that was, an AU teammate that was going to Butler. But what really sort of solidified it for me, and I'm surprised because I really wasn't that smart as an 18-year-old or mature or whatever, but you just felt something different in the way the guys interacted around each other, the way they played open gym together, their conversations. It just felt different, and I wanted to be a part of that. And so that was the sort of the ultimate selling point, I guess, for me. And when I got there, to your point, you talk about the Butler way. What's really impressed upon me over time is that it's somewhat unique what they were able to create and the guys that they were able to have there at that time that completely bought in. And a lot of that was player led. So a lot of that stuff that I learned, it wasn't coming from a coach, and it wasn't necessarily coming. I mean, they did that stuff. They taught it. They talked about the values, all those things. But it was, the Drew Stryker, Pete Campbell, Julian Betko, Mike Green, AJ Graves, that senior class, and mainly Julian, that just did not relent and held me accountable every day. And if you're not going to be the one guy not doing it, and so it was something that was expected, and that, I mean, you almost had to fall in line from day one.
Yeah, one of my favorite kind of quotes from when we interviewed Sean Van Zandt, I asked him, what was some of your favorite memories, thinking, okay, the final, the championship game runs or whatever. And he said the, like, 5 a.m. battles that you guys would have, and just, getting to learn from, like, exactly some of the older guys you're talking about. So that was like a surprising answer, but also just showed exactly what you're saying. I mean, it was always a team before me, it seemed like, mentality, which I obviously, being there those couple years, I mean, I loved, and I think that's got to be a part that, got you guys on those runs. Um, Speaking of those runs, because now I'm going to run into it, but talk about Brad Stevens a little bit. I mean, you obviously got to play for a legendary coach. We only know what he could have accomplished if he didn't end up having going to Boston. So, talk to us about what you learned from him, or what it was like playing for Brad Stevens.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Sean, Sean's just a different dude, and I love him. He's one of my favorite people in the world. I talk to him often, but he's just different. There aren't a lot of guys built that way. Like what he's telling you, and he wasn't perfect by any means, but more often than not, and none of us are. All he cared about was winning, and he had. I'll say I really have a lot of respect for him because if you think about his journey, he came in thinking, I got AJ and Mike, and they're graduating next year, and then it's going to be my time. And they left, and in came Ron and Shelvin and started. And the guy stuck with it and stuck with us and was a huge part of our success. And but it took time, and he didn't have that right away. So yeah, I but this guy, like, you could tell me how many. You could probably count on one hand how many guys you see that are playing today where they're going to be angry if their guy scores on them twice in a row, and it's not going to happen again. And that was who he was, and yeah, he was a big part of what we did. But yeah, talking about coach, he was, I was fortunate to have some good coaches overseas, and after I left Butler, and he was, and not just him. I mean, if you look at our staff that was there at the time, all those guys are coaching Division 1, and a lot of them are head coaches. I mean, so really, really good coaching staff and guys that were great tactically. They're also very good from a personal standpoint. And I think a lot of coaches you see have one or the other, or they're excellent at one of those things. Maybe it's a personal, they know how to motivate a team. They are great recruiters, but the tactical side is not great. And, we had both of those things. And I mean, obviously you can see, what he's done and what he did and has done and what those coaches do and have done. And, it's not easy to have both, but they were tired. They worked tirelessly at trying to always find a way to get better. And one of my favorite from that staff is actually Terry Johnson, who's up at Purdue on staff with Paint. And he would every single day. You talk about those early mornings when I would come through, not always, not always awake at 5:30 in the morning. And he said, we're going to be excellent today. That was always his thing. It was all about excellence. And some days it was really annoying. But it was important, to always stay on point and have that accountability of us. Um, I don't know if that really answered your question about Brad, but I think it's important to just to note how good that staff was.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely, man. And I love that. I love that quote there. But at BFC, you got something you want to add in?
Yeah, no, I think, the interesting thing, and it came apparent when we were talking to Sean. I actually asked him the same question was, I think Butler's so interesting because it just even outside of basketball, but the players on the teams, even when their pro careers end, go into a lot of leadership roles, a lot of them go into coaching. What do you think it is about the culture that kind of, builds that up to provide leaders like on and off the court?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard. I think it's become pretty hard to do that today, with just the way things have changed as far as building a culture and sustaining it and having consistency. But that was a big part of what they did. And you could see just, I think, I'm certainly, I haven't been a coach. I haven't really been in those, meetings and in those coaches' rooms when they're trying to figure things out. But I would imagine if you can build a group that buys in and buys into that culture, everything, your job becomes a whole lot easier. And part of that reason is they got those type of guys. They try to recruit those type of guys who would hold people accountable and are more likely to be coaches. I mean, generally, if you look through any level of sports, the guys who are willing to try to hold guys accountable are more likely to be coaches, because they understand how valuable and important that is. And so I don't know, it's almost like a chicken or egg thing, but we had obviously we had a lot of good leaders on the coaching side, but there was also a lot of good leaders within the players, and that's the type of guys that they brought in, and so naturally they are going to become or more likely to become coaches and good leaders.
Awesome. Yeah. And then, another thing I think even maybe more impressive than going to back-to-back national titles, being a three-time academic All-American. And it's something that, I've talked to a couple of the players about that we've interviewed. Just like one piece of advice for young student athletes, because I know we do have, some guys in high school and college that are trying to, play, be student athletes. So what's kind of one piece of advice that you have for that generation?
Well, I think first I need to you have to say thanks to Chris Miskell probably, for me personally, because it really helps when there is there's sort of a history of having All Americans or academic All Americans at your school, and because of that, people will just look. I felt like they just looked at us, and you had AJ and Drew that were there, right before me. That again, the eyes are on Butler, and it helps to have a little bit of basketball success too. But it's I had a friend and teammate overseas that always said, when you're winning, everybody eats, and I think there's some element of that. So as good or bad, however you view that, it is. I think winning has a part in being recognized for things like that, and you need some level of basketball success, but it was sort of expected. Butler, you come in, they had it right up there. That was part of that was part of our goals as a team, was to hit a 3.0 GPA. It's like you're going to do that. You're not going to let your teammates down, and I mean that certainly helps. You have to have a standard, and hopefully, like you said, this generation, hopefully you have a standard where you want to have some level of excellence in whatever you're doing, whether it's on the court or off.
Yeah, no doubt. So I'm gonna drag us back in time one more time, because I'm gonna force you to talk about some of your favorite memories. I'm gonna force you to talk about the Final Four runs, or the championship game runs, because frankly, we all love it, obviously, right? Maybe just to start, what was maybe and kind of I love Sean's answer of the 5 a.m. practices, but maybe speaking of like games or environments, or wherever you want to take it. But what was maybe one of your favorite memories during your playing days as a Butler Bulldog?
Yeah, that's a good. Well, I'll share one about him, that because I'm sure he didn't talk about it. But what I think about a lot is, especially, not to get sidetracked, but you have Purdue a couple of years ago where they have an incredible season, number one, I think, or maybe two or whatever, for a lot of the season, win the Big Ten, and then lose in the first round. People say the season's a failure, and they had a great season, and yet we had, I think, my junior year, we were down at the under four, or at some point under 4 minutes in 5 of the 6 games. And then, my senior year, we would have 2, last second wins. We have an overtime win, and so the margins are so small. But I want to take it real quickly, because I can, I guess, to our senior year semifinal of the conference tournament. And, if we don't win that tournament, we're not making the tournament, the NCAA tournament. And Sean, I think, had like 9 of our last 13 points help us end up beating Cleveland State and then make it to the final. We won. And so I had to share that about him, because I know he probably didn't. And, I would say, I guess personally, the stuff that you remember, sort of those, the winning moments and being able to celebrate and enjoy that with your teammates. And, especially the first time probably going to Final Four, once we had finally closed out, Kansas State is a top one. It's about as good as it gets. And, maybe a quick shout out to late Andrew Smith. It was sort of a coming out game for him, and he sort of, after that game, came out of his shell a little bit, and and you could tell it just found a lot of confidence in being ready and really helping us in that game. And those are the type of things that you really remember and hang on to. Just the enjoyment in that moment of being able to celebrate with your team doing something pretty special.
Yeah, and then one more about the tournament, then I'll BFC ask a few things. But I have to bring up the game because you're talking about some really close ones, and actually, you said Andrew Smith in the video of it. He's always like one of the first guys you see cheering in it. But talk to me about the Old Dominion play. I mean, that's, in my opinion, that's one of the most like underrated buzzer beaters in the history of March Madness. No one ever talks about it, and I don't know why. I mean, if it doesn't happen, who knows? Like, you guys don't go to the national championship again. I guess like half court heaves are probably more fun, but still, it was an incredible play. And Sean obviously was a big part of that too. I asked him about that. I don't. It sounded like pretty chaotic. What he was trying to do, just throw it up towards the rim, but. Talk to us about that. Like, you see the ball coming, the time's running out. What was going through your mind? What kind of walk us through that ending?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm probably not gonna give you a great memory, given that it was 15 years ago or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I do. Some of the interesting things about that, I don't remember what was drawn up. I don't know if it wasn't, if it was to use Shelvin as a decoy. I mean, logically, you would think we would put it in his hand, but Sean ended up with it. He was very capable and actually won us the next game at Pittsburgh. Or should have been what won us that game. And what the little that I remember of it, it looked like, I don't know what happened, but he must have tripped or something. And you see the ball going up, and I was somewhere around the free throw line, and I don't know, you could see there was going to be a crowd, and the only place that it sort of made sense to me that the ball might go if it was tipped around, like everyone had vacated the opposite side. So, I just started to move in that direction. Fortunately, Andrew tipped it right there. Like, literally couldn't have been a better tip. And I think the reason nobody really talks about that is layups are not that exciting. So you make the layup, obviously, is important. And I don't know. I feel like, if I remember right, I got probably more animated than I ever had in my basketball playing career. And I remember jumping with the team, and thinking, like, Andrew made a great play to keep that alive, and I don't see him anywhere. And he was out like jumping by himself at half court. I don't know what he was doing, but those are sort of like the things that I do remember from that play. But just mostly laughing later, thinking like, what was he doing? Jumping by himself. Like, the whole team is right in front of our bench, and he was jumping by himself out half court.
You're so right. I mean, if you watch the video, there's an angle where you tip it in. It's it's a low angle, and Andrew jumps in, and you look, and yeah, everyone's around you, and Andrew's nowhere to be seen. So yeah, he was definitely at half court by himself celebrating. But you know what? He was celebrating. BFC. Actually, real quick, yeah. There's so many like, you play in so many fun games during those March Madness years. And again, as a student there, I just remember my heart, being, I mean, the you bring up the pit game there. I mean, that was nuts. I mean, you ended up icing it with the, I'm gonna ask you one more, and then I'll let BFC. I promise you, I'll give you the airtime. I got to ask one more. So walk us through the end of the pit game, because that was nuts too. That might be one of the most chaotic endings to a game. Like, talk to me about just what was the, like, Shelvin fouls, right? And that's just, you can't believe that. I mean, we love Shelvin. Shelvin, you know what? You get a pass because guess what? your boy Matt Howard got fouled and made the free throws. So, like, talk to us about the ending of that game. What was going through your head? Like, just talk to us about it.
Yeah, I think I don't remember what game or play it was recently, maybe in the last year or so, where something had happened and a bad play was made, and the player was left by themselves, and nobody went and really talked to him. And I was thinking, man, a good leader would have went over and put their arm around him and said, hey, there's still 3 seconds left or whatever. And then I was thinking about that, and I was like, I don't think I even thought about Sheldon, except that I was, a little frustrated. Like, how could you make that foul? I remember having that thought. And so, I didn't do that either, but that would have been the right thing. But what I do remember is that, we sort of had a long ball play, which we were going to need to use, assuming, pretty sure it was Brown, what made both free throws. And so immediately, after they sort of decided it was 2 points, I remember, Eric Fromm was checking in, and he told me a few years ago that he does feel responsible for what happened and transpired afterwards. Because as soon as he checked in, it was, St. Patty's Day weekend. He checks in with his red hair and completely threw off the aura of everything. And he missed a free throw, and obviously, and then that crazy foul happened. But I guess the point is what was really, and I guess maybe every coach would do this. I don't know, but I felt really important that Brad, once that chaos stopped, he immediately went to, all right, what's the next thing we got to do to win? And that sort of settles you as a player and says, okay, I mean, he still has to make the free throw. And apparently, Shelvin, he told us after the game he was trying to get in his head. It must, I don't know, it must have worked for him to miss one of those two.
Yeah, I know exactly where I mean, it's just one of those things where you know exactly where you were. So I
Mm.
just remember exactly where I was during that. And I mean, talk about a roller coaster of emotion. That's about as a big a roller coaster as you can get. But BFC, what you got, man?
Yeah, I mean, first off, Pitt that year had maybe the most devastating 3 game run, not counting their other win. But people forget that was the same year that Kemba broke the ankles of the guy and hit the game winner in the Big East tournament, which has been played, probably one of the most highlighted plays of all time, and then to lose in that way. Um, but kind of going back to, the transition between 2010 and 2011, obviously with when schools are in the national championship, they expect a couple players to go into the league, like the big schools at least. But for Butler losing our only lottery pick ever to the draft, and then coming back the next year, what's kind of the mindset as you go into that summer, knowing that you have the bones of the team, you have yeah, you have the bones, but then Gordon obviously being such a massive piece leaves. What's kind of the mindset change as you know that a good portion of your scoring production is going to be filled up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the coaches did a pretty good job of trying to recenter us, but also maintain sort of an expectation that we're going to set the goal where we want to go. And that was one of the messages going into our junior year, that they talked about a lot. They had said that it was a really young team my sophomore year, so stepping back 2 years, and they said, "Hey, our goal, let's make the NCAA tournament," and we did. And they said, maybe we set the bar too low. Let's try to make the Final Four. And so that was a good. It's sort of interesting when you think about it, just from the standpoint of what are you building towards throughout the year, and how are you viewing that then once you potentially reach something, whatever you've set out to reach. And so it was the same. The point is, it was sort of the same thing. All right, we've been there before. Why not? Let's set it there again. What do we need to do to get there? And you're right. It wasn't just Gordon, but a really important piece we lost. Not to take anything away from Avery or Nick, was Willie Beasley, who was immensely important to that team, and from the standpoint of being able to guard a lot of different positions and switch a lot of different things, and just what you could do from a defensive standpoint. Losing him and Gordon at the same time was a pretty big deal. And so, we went a year, and I think one of the things, if we were overconfident, you got it just demolished in the first game. We went to Louisville. I don't know who thought that was a good idea to open up their new stadium, and we got absolutely smoked. And so that sort of recenters you. And then, yeah, we had a lot of growing pains. We were trying to figure things out, incorporate new guys into the lineup, and had some freshmen that we needed to be productive for us. And, went through a pretty tough stretch because of that. And, one of my teammates, we were talking about that recently, how it is different than today, what the team is dealing with today from a competitive standpoint, Big East versus Horizon League. But at the same time, every single team was like, they're gunning for you every single game. And that's a tough thing to get up for when you go to a place like Cleveland, or not Cleveland State. Cleveland State was always good, but you go to a place like Youngstown or Valpo, that are sort of quiet towns, and not, it's, you have to find it inside. And so that's not easy either. But it is a different, level you're dealing with. And so when we were, when we were 6-5 in the Horizon League that year, and really struggling, I don't think anyone rationally would have thought that's a NCAA team at that time. But it was, it was a journey. You're constantly working through things and trying to figure things out. We did have some lineup changes, and some of those things ended up working out for us. But it's not like that happened. I mean, that was in February when we started to figure things out.
Yeah, and then just kind of one last question that I have. Obviously, your style of play is just something that every basketball fan can love. It's kind of obviously in Indiana, the Bob Knight type of player, just grinding everything out, 100% effort all the time, good leader. Um, who has been your favorite player to watch at Butler since you graduated?
Oh man, yeah, that's a tough one. I'll tell you real quickly. It wasn't all the time, and one my favorite story. I've told it before, so I apologize if you already heard it. But from that standpoint, we were playing in a tournament up in Alaska my freshman year, and I let the ball on the post and got scored on easily twice in a row early in the game. They took me out and subbed in our three, and he basically told me, like, I will show you how to guard the post. And he went in there and worked his butt off, and the guy didn't touch it for like the next 3 minutes. And the guy was gassed, like he was completely gassed in 3 minutes. But what he was trying to show me was, you're replaceable. Like, if you think that you don't have to play hard, you can think again. It's not even a five. It's going to come in and replace it to three. And so that was a big lesson for me. Help shape that. But I don't know. There's been a lot guys that I sort of I don't know, that I relate to, maybe the most, like a Shrabish, that they play a lot below the rim and just try to make smart plays and be versatile. Great teammate. It's hard not to, most recently think about like Kamar, and guy, just an amazing teammate, guy who was all about winning. And those are the people that are really fun to watch. Guys that compete defensively, especially. That's sort of my thing. I love seeing guys that compete on the defensive end, especially.
Yeah. So BFC, you guys, I'm probably gonna jump into some fan questions. Again, Matt, appreciate all your time. I know we've been keeping you here, but just a few other questions we got from some other fans. Um, this might be one of my favorite questions I got, but was I'll paraphrase kind of what they said because they rambled for a while, but basically they want to know kind of what was the idea behind the mustache. When did you decide to grow it, more or less?
Yeah. So I don't know who. I got to step back a second. There was a rule, and I don't know the origin of this or why it was this, but the rule stated no hair below the upper lip, and so so guys, I can't even remember who did it first, but one of the guys my senior year, no, sorry, it was the junior year. One of the guys said they're going to grow a mustache, and we should all do it as until we lose. And so I was like, all right, I guess I'll be in on this. And all of them could actually grow some facial hair. I could not really. And so mine was much slower growing, also much harder to see. And I think as we continued to win, because we went undefeated in the Horizon League that year, guys started just shaving it off and gave up on the thing we were doing together. And then once we got into the tournament and won, it sort of become a thing. And I was like, yeah, I didn't want that. And yet at the same time, I was being told that, maybe it might have been good luck or something. And so you sort of feel stuck. Like you don't want that to become a story, certainly not with how bad it was. And yet at the same time, you have a good thing going. It's like you can't. How do you get rid of it now? So unfortunately, um, I was the lone holdout on our team with that, and it became something it never should have been.
I will say I gotta say Adam Morrison has you beat on the worst mustache of all time, but the greatest. Like it's so bad it's good, right? That type of thing. So you and him. Now I'm biased because I'm a Butler guy, but Adam Morrison will always be number one in my heart for the mustache. You will be a very close second, mostly because of my bias. But yes, uh, I gotta be honest. Every time I think back to those days, of course, I think the long shaggy hair, the mustache. It was, it looked great though, man. I gotta be. It looked great. You looked like a baller. It looked great.
Hey,
Uh,
you can be honest. You can
no,
be honest.
trust me.
There's nothing great about any of that.
Trust me. I as a guy who also cannot grow facial hair, I've tried the mustache. My wife, I think I woke up one night and my wife had a razor above my face, and I said, "All right, honey, I'll shave it. I won't. I will never do this again." So no, I totally relate. But the next one, again, another kind of long question. Let me kind of break this down. So it says when Butler had their open practice at the 2010 Final Four, that was the largest crowd any Butler basketball team had ever appeared before. Around 25,000. Exceeded, of course, when they played Michigan State in the national semifinal. Do the players know how large the crowd was before they came out? And what was Matt's reaction when he saw how many people were there to see them practice?
Man, I'm the worst person to ask about this. I remember I do remember a coach or one of our coaches saying they're expecting a ton of people to be here. And so I don't think because of that it was that much of a surprise. But also the thing about there being 20,000 people in a 70,000 seat stadium is that it doesn't seem that crazy, because it's so far, a lot of it's so far removed, that it's like a third of the seats are filled. So in some ways, I mean, maybe it didn't feel like as much as it was because of that. But also, I, if I guess I had a regret is that I didn't really allow myself to soak in a lot of that stuff. I was trying to be like so focused on the task at hand. And here, I know exactly what we're trying to do with this shoot around that I wouldn't even let myself look around and sort of soak it in. And so I think because of that, I didn't really appreciate. That's why I was saying might not be a great person to ask, but I do remember very, very specifically before we went out there and into that day, I remember someone saying there's going to be a lot of people here. Like we're getting reported that there's going to be a ton of people to practice.
I will say, from my memory. I remember walking through the bookstore on the 2010 national championship run, and it's Butler. There's not that many. I mean, it was never very crowded. You couldn't move. It was like you couldn't move. You couldn't get to Atherton. You couldn't go down to C Club. Like it was like you had to navigate your way through. So I just remember not just obviously you guys had it down there at the practice, but I just remember the campus just being so many outsiders. You're like, oh, where were you before? But no, it was a cool experience. Another one. Sorry, we got the fans like you, man. So we got a few of them here.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
But this one is let's see here. This one says I've talked to coaches that claimed they never drew up plays. Or wait, sorry, that coaches never draw up plays from scratch in a timeout. They always run plays that have been worked on in practice. Did Brad Stevens ever? Sorry, I'm trying to read this. This is not. Did Brad Stevens sometimes draw up plays from scratch during a timeout?
Yes, and yeah, that was some of the brilliance of him and that staff. And here's what I'll say to that. I understand where they're coming from because generally, if you have a certain group, or maybe you have a guy you just can't trust to do something new, then yes, generally the guys or teams will have a bunch of plays in their pockets, and then it's like, all right, we're going to draw up this specific action for this time that we've already seen before. But what I think some of the brilliance of that, and we had a lot of high IQ guys, so where you could show us something, and we're going to be able to execute it. The part of the brilliance was in practices, we played a lot of situational things. So we would play end of game type situations where white team's up 27 seconds left or whatever, and so the brilliance I would say of that, because I didn't do a lot of that with teams after the fact, and I realized what they were doing, after I had played with other teams for a while, is that they wanted us prepared for any kind of situation. And part of those situational things is that, an assistant coach that had one of the teams could call a timeout and draw something up. And then we had to go out there and execute it and be able to execute then whatever situation arose after it. And so, yeah, we had seen it before. And I mean, he's really good. And that coaching staff was really good at making adjustments and seeing what teams did. And I think a lot of times, probably we could have run some of those plays earlier in the game, but he wanted to have that in his pocket and, have it ready if we really needed something at the end of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't put it past Brad to do that. That's Brad Stevens, right? Again, I apologize. I'm gonna fly through these because you got a lot of admirers, man. But so here's another one. And I'm gonna skip. First of all, I appreciate you answering some of the questions on Twitter. So if I just want to clarify, if anyone out there, if you don't hear your question asked, it probably means that Matt responded via actual tweet. So I'm gonna let you look at his response on the tweet versus me asking it again on here. But another one is we often talk about the destination, but overlook the journey it took to get there. Were there any specific moments your freshman or sophomore years, or during the regular season, your junior or senior years, that you thought were key to the national championship runs in 2010, 2011?
Oh man, it's a culmination to that point, the question. Personally, one of the most impactful things for me was the game to go the round of 32 to go to the Sweet 16 my freshman year, where I was not very good and I just needed to be okay, and we would have been a Sweet 16 team. And I tell you that to say, like, it completely altered the way I viewed my my fitness and the way that I approach things, where I needed to be a lot better. And that was really impactful. But it was I really do believe it was a culmination of how how important it was to compete and how that just became the culture what we did, open gyms and stuff that would seem meaningless. We had some crazy guys that they weren't going to let someone not work hard and not give an effort even at something that didn't seem meaningful. So all those things build up, and having great coaches and guys. It's like I said before, I didn't really appreciate it until I got away from it to realize how sort of unique that it's almost like I think I've heard somebody say it was like lightning in a bottle. You get really good players with really good coaches, and then you have a little bit of fortune along the way, and you're able to create something like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then kind of sorry, I'm like sifting through all these so I can kind of combine them into one. But again, appreciate you answering some of these on Twitter. Basically the last one, which is kind of fairly probably the most common question, other than stuff from the past, but the recent stuff. Obviously, Butler today has had they had a losing streak, right? And again, we ended it last night, so feels good because a lot of these questions came before that losing streak ended. But just what maybe what a lot of the questions were kind of like would be your advice as far as like if you talked about kind of your senior year, you guys were struggling a little bit. What advice would you give to a team that's struggling a little bit or needs to get out of a rut, has a losing streak going on, to kind of get back on track?
Yeah, I mean the best thing that you can do, at least in my opinion, and from teams I've been on, is to look outside yourself and figure out what can I do to help the team, and because it's really hard when you're going through that psychologically. You think about yourself. It's like, what am I not doing, or it could be even more selfish than that. It's like, if I had X or Y different opportunity, we would be winning these games. And so it's the hardest thing to do is to look outside yourself and be like, all right, how can I make Sean better? Like, what am I missing here? Like, what can I be doing better to help our team win? And also within the games, because when things aren't going well, I remember, it's so true. I remember listening to a NFL player that played on an 0-16 team talk about it after the season, and what he said was, after you've lost so many games in a row, it's really hard to not think at some point something's going to go wrong. And, and so the only way to get through that, either you got to be like a powerhouse at talking to yourself and convincing yourself that's not going to be the case, or to have, as a collective effort, someone who is bringing you together constantly, refocus you on the next play, and continually giving each other confidence. And so, hopefully in these games, they're coming together more, and there's somebody or some ones that are constantly, keeping guys motivated and confident.
Yeah, and I think just speaking of last night's game, I think one of the biggest. I posted this stat a few times. Butler, in 7 out of their 10 losses, it was a 1-2 possession game with 3 minutes or less left in the game.
There you
So,
go. Yeah.
right, they've been this close in so many games, and I think last night was you got that scare for a second. It was like, oh crap, this is going to happen again, like the Villanova game, and they found the way to pull it off in the end. So I'm really hoping that, like you were saying, I hope that that's kind of like maybe the mentality change. I love seeing like Pierre scream like yes after you could see it was just a big
Mm.
weight off their shoulders, and that's what I'll vent for a second. That's what frustrates me a little bit sometimes about some of Butler Nation. Not all of you guys. I love most of you, but sometimes it's like people act like these guys don't want to win, and like you just said there, it weighs on you. And I think these
Mhm.
guys, I think that was a big monkey off their back. So I'm excited to see them go play UConn next. But
And I'll just say one thing real quick, because you don't always know what guys are going through. Like, a lot of times a guy might be playing injured, and so you might see him in a slump. Maybe he's playing through something. That's obviously possibly the case. And beyond that, I don't know that that's what's actually happening or something like that might be. I really, I'm not saying this is like they would have won all 9 games or 8 games or whatever it was, but I really do believe, Augusto is more with this team and lineups and just how they play, that he's worth more than the 5 points per game he was averaging because of the different things that he could do defensively, especially. And again, I'm very biased in the way, or I very much look at the game from a defensive and a big man standpoint first. And the things that he was able to do, they can't replicate that with someone else. And just making some teams uncomfortable, putting a little bit of pressure on them from that spot, I think is worth more than just the 5 points per game he was averaging. I'm not saying he's some miracle worker or anything, but I think that had a bigger impact than people probably realized when he got hurt.
I will also add that Jamie Kaiser Jr. getting hurt before the season even started,
Mm-hmm.
and no one ever wants to talk about, but because he never got to play, but he would have been a great defensive presence as well. I don't think it's any secret that Ja's probably playing through a little something. So yeah, definitely, injuries have definitely been a factor for sure. But no, again, Matt, we've taken up enough of your time. But we obviously love talking to alum and appreciate you talking about what you've been up to, the good old days, and kind of your thoughts on today. Again, been really fun having a lot of you guys on here. I always love to sign it off with a little "Go Dogs."
Yeah, I'm going to tell you something real quick because to me it's funny. It's interesting to hear what people are thinking about, and I mean nothing is funnier than hearing like what a young nerd kid is thinking about. And I'd went and talked to a 7th grade team a couple of weekends ago, and just tried to give them a couple of quick points because they don't care who I am. And then they ask questions, and one of the first questions the kid goes, "How many times have you dunked on in your career?" It's like, there it is. Like, maybe that's what I need to cover initially, just get that out of the way. Um, but no, it was
Do you know the number?
no, but Saturday I got to see Robbie Hummel, who's one of my favorite people in the world, and that one, he dunked on me really badly. They have a I think they still do it. Seniors here in Indiana, they have a all-star game at Knightstown at the Hoosier Gym, and we were playing there. And the very first play of that game, he came down and just tomahawked it on me, and that's one I've never been able to forget. It's scarred me a little bit, but no, I didn't know the number. It was just hilarious that you want to talk about things that you think real quickly that might win you games, and you want 7th graders to focus on that. And the only thing he's probably the whole time just waiting, like, will he finish so I can ask him how many times he got dunked on. It's great.
No, that's hilarious, man. But yeah, no, I again can't thank you enough for hopping on here. We again, I just did it, but love having you guys on. Just hearing the stories is always so fun, reminiscing on the good old days. So appreciate your insight into everything. Again, if there's anything else you want to add or anything like that, go for it. Otherwise, I think BFC, you got anything else or you're good? Yeah, yeah. Oh, Matt, again, appreciate you. Appreciate everything you've done for Butler Nation and Butler in general. Again, I always love to end. I'm gonna say it again.
I
Go
like your
Dogs, baby.
clothes. I like your clothes. Go
Go
Dogs.
Dogs.
You
Go
guys have
Dogs.
a good one.
No, I appreciate you, man.